The transport ship Orion Star moved silently through the dark sea of space. It was one of the biggest ships in the Galactic Union, carrying hundreds of passengers, aliens of every kind, traveling between distant worlds. The halls were full of strange colors, glowing lights, and soft humming sounds. For most of the crew, this was just another trip, another safe voyage through the void. Among the many travelers sat a single human man named Eli Grant. He looked out of the window, watching the endless stars. His reflection in the glass was calm but tired. His short brown hair was messy, and there were dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist, just a mechanic returning home from a mining colony on the edge of the galaxy. To everyone else, he was nobody special, just another quiet passenger sitting in the corner of the observation deck. The alien crew often looked at him with mild curiosity. Humans were still rare out here. The pilot, a tall reptilian alien with silver scales named Tavren, whispered to his co-pilot, "Strange species. Always so small, yet they walk around like they own the stars." His co-pilot chuckled.
"Harmless, but odd."
"They travel on ships they didn't even build." Eli didn't hear them, or maybe he didn't care. He sipped his lukewarm drink and tried to focus on the stars beyond the glass. The hum of the engines was steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the ship. He could almost fall asleep to it. But then his brow furrowed. There was something off. A faint vibration ran under his seat. Very small but steady. He felt it again, then again. That's not right, he thought. Years of working around engines had trained his ears to catch even the smallest change. It was the kind of vibration that didn't come from turbulence. It came from a machine struggling to stay stable. He glanced up toward the ceiling lights. They flickered for a second, just a faint blink, and then steadied again. No one else seemed to notice. The aliens around him were chatting, laughing, or scrolling through their holographic tablets. A mother with pale blue skin held her child close and pointed out a distant nebula glowing through the window. To them it was a peaceful trip. To Eli, it was a ticking sound in the back of his mind, growing louder every minute. He stood up quietly and walked down the narrow corridor toward the front of the ship. The air smelled faintly of ozone and coolant. Passing the crew quarters, he heard muffled voices through the door, pilots discussing something in low tones. "Core readings fluctuating again," one said. "It's probably a sensor error," another replied. But the tension in their voices said otherwise. When Eli reached the viewing deck near the engine core display, he stopped. The holographic map showed a slow pulse of red across one of the main conduits. He frowned. That conduit powered the ship's gravity stabilizer. If it failed, the entire ship would start to drift, maybe even tear apart. He looked around. No one was paying attention to the warning light. A maintenance drone hovered lazily nearby, cleaning dust from the walls. "You're missing something, buddy," Eli muttered softly, tapping the screen. The drone beeped in confusion, then floated away. He sighed and leaned closer to the panel. The display flickered again, showing strange oscillations. Frequency mismatch, he realized. That wasn't a simple glitch. Someone had misaligned the phase regulators. It would take hours to fix, but in space, hours could mean disaster. Suddenly, the ship gave a small jolt. Not much. Just enough to make cups rattle and passengers glance up. The overhead lights dimmed for a heartbeat and then returned. The pilot's calm voice came through the intercom. "Passengers, please remain seated. We are experiencing a minor power fluctuation. There is no danger." Eli stayed still, his eyes narrowing. He could hear the tension behind that "no danger." He had heard it before in mining tunnels when the reactors overloaded. The same calm tone before everything went wrong. He walked toward a side hallway leading to the maintenance level. The air was warmer here, filled with the low hum of the ship's massive heart. He could feel the vibration through the metal walls. "She's breathing heavy," he said under his breath, as if talking to an old friend. When he reached the engineering door, a small alien guard stopped him. "Restricted area, human passenger," it hissed politely. Eli nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I know. Just thought you might want to tell your engineers that your frequency regulators are slipping about 3 microcycles off balance." The guard blinked its 4 eyes, confused. "You shouldn't know that," Eli shrugged. "I shouldn't, but I do." Before the guard could reply, a deep alarm suddenly echoed through the corridors, a long metallic wail that froze everyone in place. The lights turned crimson, bathing the hall in emergency red. A voice shouted over the comms, "Warning! Reactor instability detected. All crew to stations. Eli turned sharply. The hum he'd been hearing grew into a violent roar. The floor shook beneath his feet and distant screams echoed from the passenger deck. He didn't wait for orders. While others panicked, Eli ran straight toward the engineering bay doors. The guard shouted after him, but he didn't stop. His boots pounded against the floor as the ship began to tilt. Steam burst from a vent above and sparks rained down like falling stars. Inside the bridge, the alien pilots struggled with the controls. One screamed, "We're losing power to the containment field." Another shouted, "Reactor temperature climbing past safe limits." Then as the systems failed one by one, the captain turned toward the status monitor and froze. A small figure was moving across the engineering deck, forcing open an access hatch with his bare hands. "Who is that?" the co-pilot gasped. The captain's eyes widened. That's the human passenger." The camera feed flickered again, just long enough to show Eli Grant crawling into the heart of the failing ship, surrounded by fire and smoke. The captain's voice trembled. "Even the human dares where we do not." The bridge fell silent as the Orion star shuddered in the darkness. And so began the story of the passenger no one noticed, until the moment he became their only hope. The red emergency lights flashed across the corridors, painting everything in a crimson glow. The Orion star groaned like a living creature in pain. Metal screeched, panels cracked, and frightened voices filled the air. The once peaceful transport ship had turned into a nightmare of alarms and chaos. Eli Grant moved through the smoke-filled hallway, gripping a railing as the ship lurched violently. A loud crash echoed behind him. An overhead pipe burst, releasing a cloud of white steam that burned against his skin. But he didn't stop. His instincts told him the situation was far worse than the crew believed. On the upper deck, alien passengers screamed and clung to seats as artificial gravity flickered on and off. One moment they were pressed to the floor, the next they floated helplessly mid-air. A mother cried out as her child drifted upward, spinning, until a security officer caught them and pulled them down. Luggage, cups, and metal trays floated like debris in a storm. The soft hum of space travel was now a storm of sirens and fear. Inside the control bridge, Captain Tavern slammed his clawed hand on the main console. "Report," he barked, his voice sharp with panic. The co-pilot shouted over the alarms. "Reactor containment is breaking down. Core temperature rising. We've lost the second stabilizer ring. Activate emergency dampeners." The captain ordered. "They're not responding. Power fluctuations spreading across all decks." Another jolt shook the bridge, throwing crew members to the ground. Sparks erupted from the ceiling. Tavern looked up at the holographic display. The image of the glowing reactor core flickered violently, surrounded by warning symbols. He had flown through asteroid fields, fought pirates, and faced black hole storms. But this was different. The ship was dying from the inside out, and then he saw something on the security screen. Someone moving through the restricted lower levels. The camera zoomed in, showing the human passenger crawling under a half-collapsed maintenance panel, carrying only a tool bag. The captain frowned. "What is that human doing down there?" The chief engineer hissed, "He'll be vaporized in seconds." "The reactor shielding is failing." But the human didn't stop. Eli reached the main engineering chamber, coughing through the thick smoke. He looked around. The heart of the Orion star was a mess of sparking cables and glowing conduits. The air smelled of burning ozone. The massive core pulsed bright orange, surrounded by streams of unstable plasma. The containment field shimmered like glass about to shatter. 3 alien engineers struggled with the controls, their 4 hands flying across panels. One shouted, "Field is collapsing." "We can't stabilize it." Another screamed, "The calibration matrix is corrupted." Nothing responds. Then Eli's voice cut through the chaos. Calm, steady. "You're losing containment because your feedback loop is reversed." The engineers turned, stunned. "What?" He pointed to the flickering monitor. "You're feeding power into the regulator instead of out of it. It's eating itself." The chief engineer, a thick-scaled alien with bright green eyes, bared his fangs. "Human, you have no authority here." Eli didn't answer. He pushed past him, grabbed a fallen tool from the floor, and yanked open a side panel. The aliens froze as he started disconnecting glowing cables with his bare hands. "Stop!" one shouted. "You'll kill us all." "Maybe," Eli said softly. "Or maybe I'll stop it from killing you first." The ship trembled again, harder this time. The floor buckled, sending the youngest engineer crashing into a wall. Sparks flew everywhere. A wave of light burst from the reactor, washing over them. The heat was intense, almost unbearable. On the bridge, the captain stared at the energy readings climbing off the chart. "What's happening down there?" he yelled. The co-pilot looked pale. "The human? He's inside the containment sector." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the alarm seemed distant. The captain whispered, "He's going to die." Down in the chamber, Eli gritted his teeth, sweat dripping into his eyes. He connected 2 loose conduits, then reached for a cable glowing bright blue. His gloves burned, but he didn't stop. "Come on," he muttered. "You're not done yet." He slammed the cable into the port and the entire ship jolted. The lights flickered, then steadied, just for a second. The vibration eased slightly. The core's pulse slowed, the glow dimming. The aliens stared, their jaws wide. He did something," one whispered. Eli fell to one knee, breathing hard. "Not yet fixed," he said between gasps. "You've got a phase loop still misaligned. You'll need to resync it manually." The chief engineer blinked. "How do you even know that?" Eli looked up, his face half lit by the glowing light of the reactor. "Because I built engines like this, long before your people started flying them." The aliens exchanged stunned looks. Before they could reply, the reactor's warning siren screamed again, louder than before. A deep vibration rolled through the floor. Eli's expression changed. "Fear? No. Focus." "She's still going critical," he said. "But I can buy us more time." He pushed himself back up and grabbed another tool. His hands moved with practiced precision. The aliens could only watch, frozen between disbelief and hope. Up on the bridge, the captain stared at the monitor showing the human surrounded by blinding energy. "Why isn't he running?" the co-pilot asked. "Because," the captain said quietly, his throat tightening. "He's trying to save us." A moment later, a voice echoed over the comms. Eli's voice, calm and firm. "Captain Tavran, if you can hear me, I need you to reroute power to Auxiliary Grid 3. Now." The captain blinked. "He's giving orders, do it," the chief engineer shouted. "He's stabilizing the loop." The captain slammed his claw on the switch. The bridge lights dimmed as power surged through the backup lines. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then slowly, the reactor's pulse steadied. The alarm softened. The ship stopped shaking. Everyone held their breath. Then the captain spoke softly, his voice almost a whisper. "The human saved the ship." But as the relief spread through the crew, Eli looked back at the core and saw the flicker return. A faint glow in the center, like a heartbeat that refused to die. His eyes narrowed. "It's not over," he said. And before anyone could stop him, Eli stepped deeper into the reactor chamber, toward the light that could end them all. The air inside the reactor chamber shimmered like heat rising off desert sand. Every light on the control panels blinked red, warning of imminent failure. The walls throbbed with the pulse of the dying core, slow, heavy, like the heartbeat of a giant about to stop. Eli Grant stood alone in the heart of the chaos, his face illuminated by the angry orange glow of the reactor. Sweat dripped down his neck, his breathing harsh and quick. His clothes were torn, his gloves scorched, and his hands trembled from the electric feedback. But his eyes were calm, focused, determined. Around him, alien engineers shouted into their comms, their scaled faces tight with panic. "The field is still collapsing," one screamed. "Containment down to 20%. Another voice echoed over the loudspeakers. "Evacuate Sector 7 immediately. Repeat, evacuate." But Eli didn't move. He stared at the trembling plasma core, analyzing every sound and flicker. The energy pattern was wrong, unstable. The alien engineers had built their systems on top of old Earth tech, copying designs they barely understood. He recognized the mistakes. He'd seen them before, years ago, on forgotten mining ships that burned themselves to dust. He muttered softly, almost to himself, "You're not dying today, sweetheart." "Human," shouted the chief engineer from the upper platform, gripping the railing as smoke filled the room. "You cannot stay there. You'll be killed." Eli looked up at him and smiled faintly. "Then you'd better make sure my death's worth it." He slammed his hands onto the console, overriding the system lockout. The display flickered wildly, text and symbols scrolling faster than the eye could follow. His fingers danced across the holographic controls. Sparks burst from a nearby panel, scorching his sleeve, but he didn't stop. Through the comlink, Captain Tavern's voice roared. "Grant, what are you doing?" "Get out of there," Eli replied without looking up. "Your reactor's using an inverted feedback coil. It's creating a power loop. If I can reroute the stabilizer manually, I can shut the loop down. That's impossible. Even our best engineers can't do that." "Yeah," Eli said quietly, "because they never tried it my way." He tore open a maintenance hatch and crawled halfway inside. The narrow tunnel was filled with humming conduits and streams of glowing energy. The sound was deafening, like standing next to a roaring waterfall made of light. His tools rattled in his belt as he climbed deeper, each motion steady and practiced. Behind him, the alien engineers watched the human vanish into the guts of their ship. "He's insane," one whispered. "He's not wearing radiation shielding." But the chief engineer shook his head slowly. "No, he's something else." Inside the narrow conduit, Eli gripped a metal pipe for balance as another shockwave hit. The entire ship shuddered violently and the light dimmed. He knew he had seconds before the system overloaded completely. He reached a panel deep inside the tunnel, a maze of glowing coils and flickering energy cells. The readouts were unstable, readings off the scale. Come on," he whispered, pulling out a plasma wrench. The tool vibrated in his hand as he twisted open the first coupler. The moment it disconnected, the entire tunnel flared bright blue. Heat burned through his gloves. The wrench slipped, but he caught it just before it fell into the energy stream below. "Almost there," he breathed. On the bridge, the captain leaned over the console, watching the data feed. "Energy levels dropping slightly," the co-pilot said. "He's doing something." The captain's voice was low. "He's buying us time." Back inside the tunnel, Eli's movements became faster, more precise. He switched off one line, rerouted another, and then reached for a damaged conduit pulsing red. He tore it out and jammed a new cable in its place. For a moment, the light steadied. The ship's vibration slowed. Eli exhaled, relief flickering across his face. But then the ground trembled violently. The reactor screamed like a wounded beast. The red warning light flashed again, brighter than before. "No," Eli muttered. "That's not possible." He checked the readings and froze. The problem wasn't just the stabilizer. The entire phase core matrix was misaligned. The reactor wasn't dying, it was tearing itself apart. He slammed his fist against the wall. "They built this thing wrong from the start." His comlink crackled. "Grant, talk to us," the captain shouted. Eli's voice came back, calm but grim. "You've got a full cascade collapse incoming. Your design's missing a failsafe system. You copied the wrong version of the Earth model." The bridge fell silent. The aliens looked at one another in shock. "He knows the schematics?" whispered the co-pilot. Eli continued, his voice steady. "I can realign the phase core manually, but someone needs to reroute auxiliary flow from the upper deck. Now." The captain didn't hesitate. "Do it," he barked at his crew. In the chamber, the temperature soared. The air shimmered. Eli gritted his teeth as energy crackled through the conduits. The floor glowed faintly under his boots. He reached the last coupling, his hands shaking. His vision blurred from the heat. "Just one more turn," he whispered. "Come on, girl. Hold together." The moment he locked the coupling in place, a wave of blue light exploded across the room. For an instant, everything was silent. Then the reactor's pulse slowed to a steady rhythm. The trembling stopped. The alarms quieted. Eli leaned back against the wall, breathing hard, covered in sweat and ash. "That should do it," he whispered. On the bridge, the crew erupted in cheers. "He did it," one cried. "The core's stabilizing." But the celebration was short-lived. A low rumble rolled through the ship again, deeper, slower. The captain's eyes widened as new readings flashed across the screen. No. The containment field's weakening again. In the chamber, Eli looked up as cracks of white light spread across the reactor's surface. His heart sank. "She's holding together with tape and prayers," he muttered. He turned toward the intercom and spoke quietly. "Captain, it's not over yet. The system's too damaged. The only way to stop a full meltdown..." He paused, staring at the blinding core. "It's from inside." The captain's voice broke through, desperate. "Grant, don't you dare!" But the line went dead. Eli stared into the burning light, then reached down and picked up his wrench again. "All right," he whispered. "One more try." And with that, the human who was once just a passenger stepped deeper into the fire. Smoke drifted through the reactor chamber like fog after a storm. The emergency lights flickered. painting everything in red and gold. The ship was quiet for the first time in hours, too quiet. The alien engineers stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the narrow tunnel where the human had vanished. Sparks still fell from broken panels and the air was heavy with heat and silence. Then a voice crackled through the comms, faint, rough, but alive. "Captain Tavern," core holding steady. "For now." The crew gasped. The captain gripped the console so tightly his claws dug into the metal. "Grant, you're still alive!" A weak chuckle came through the static. "Barely, but I've seen worse. Get out of there," the captain ordered. "That chamber is a death trap." "No can do," Eli replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We still have a cascade buildup in the secondary loop. If I walk away now, this ship won't last 10 minutes. The captain growled low, his tail flicking in frustration. "How do you even know this technology, human? You speak like one of our own engineers." For a long moment there was silence. Only the hum of the reactor filled the bridge. Then Eli spoke again, his tone quiet, thoughtful, almost sad. "Because it was our technology first." Every eye on the bridge turned toward the speaker. "What do you mean?" the co-pilot whispered. Eli's voice came slowly, heavy with memory. "Your phase core, your entire drive system. It all came from a human prototype. Decades ago, before the Union ever found us, one of Earth's research ships vanished beyond charted space. You probably called it the Varela incident." The captain's eyes widened. "That's not possible. That was over 100 cycles ago." Eli continued, "It was real. The Varela was experimenting with hybrid reactors, combining human fusion design with alien crystals recovered from a crashed probe. It disappeared in deep space. Your people must have found the wreck and reverse-engineered what was left. You copied it, but not all of it," the chief engineer hissed. "You're saying humans built the base design of our star drives?" "Not all of it," Eli said softly. "Just enough to make them dangerous if misunderstood. I worked on the last functioning model before it was banned on Earth. I know every wire, every pulse. That's why I recognized the sound when your ship started humming wrong." The captain stared at the main screen in silence. The revelation hit him harder than the explosion had. For centuries, his people had believed they were the first to conquer faster than light travel. They had laughed at humanity's small, fragile ships, called them primitive, slow, and clumsy. And now the man saving them claimed that the heart of their own technology had human roots. "Why would you hide this?" the captain finally asked, his voice low. Eli paused. His next words were quiet, filled with weight. "Because pride destroys faster than fire. Every species thinks they're the masters of the stars. But no one remembers who built the bridge that brought them here. I didn't want credit. I just didn't want anyone else to die the same way we did." "Die?" "The Varela exploded during a test flight," Eli said. "I was one of 3 survivors. We sealed the records and swore no one would rebuild it. But your people did. And now..." He looked around the glowing chamber. "Here we are." The alien crew exchanged uneasy glances. Their world had shifted in an instant. On the bridge, the captain took a deep breath. "Grant, if this design is so dangerous, can you stop it from failing again?" Eli laughed softly, but it was a tired laugh. "I can try. But your power matrix is burned out. The failsafe circuit's gone. The only way to stabilize the system now is a manual realignment from inside the radiation field." The captain slammed his hand on the console. "That's suicide." "I know," Eli replied simply. "But it's better than watching 500 people die. Let us send drones." The captain shouted. "They don't have human hands," Eli said quietly, "or human stubbornness." The communication line went silent. Everyone on the bridge could hear only the distant hum of the ship, the heartbeat of a machine holding together by sheer willpower. Finally, the captain lowered his head. His voice was softer now, almost reverent. "Why are you doing this, human? You don't even know us." Eli took a slow breath, looking at the glowing core. "Because someone once saved me the same way. And if one person hadn't believed a stranger was worth it, I wouldn't be here now. Maybe it's time I return the favor." The captain swallowed hard. He had commanded ships across galaxies, fought pirates, faced war. But never had he met a being like this human. Small, fragile, yet unshakable. "Grant," he said finally, his voice breaking, "if we live through this, the galaxy will know your name." Eli smiled faintly, though no one could see it. "Don't bother. Just make sure the next time someone builds a ship like this, they listen before it's too late." The captain wanted to say something more, but the comms cut out again, static and silence. On the monitor, the last thing they saw was the human walking toward the blazing light of the reactor, wrench in hand. His steps were slow but steady. Each one echoed like a drumbeat in the quiet room. As the light swallowed his figure, the chief engineer whispered, "He's walking into death." The captain closed his eyes. "No," he said softly. "He's walking into history." The reactor chamber blazed like a second sun. Its light filled every corner of the ship, casting long shadows that trembled across the walls. The heat was unbearable and the air shimmered as if the metal itself were melting. The alarms had fallen silent now, replaced by a deep rhythmic hum, a sound that meant the ship was holding together, but only just. Eli Grant stood at the center of it all, framed by the blinding glow. His face was pale, slick with sweat, his hair damp against his forehead. His gloved hands trembled slightly as he held the plasma wrench, its handle scorched from the last surge. Behind him, the energy barrier pulsed dangerously, thin and unstable. One wrong movement, one tiny spark, and the entire chamber could collapse into fire. He looked at the reactor, the bright, swirling core of power that fed the Orion star. It was alive, violent, unpredictable. He had managed to delay the meltdown, but the readings on the console told him the truth. The containment field was collapsing again. Slowly, irreversibly. He took a long breath and whispered to himself, "She's not going to make it." On the bridge, Captain Tavern shouted into the comms, "Grant, report!" Eli's voice came through, steady but faint. "Containment holding at 9%. Radiation levels rising. You've got about 15 minutes before the reactor breaches." The captain turned to his engineers. "Options?" The chief engineer shook his head. "None, the stabilizers fused. It would take a miracle to realign the field manually." Tavern's eyes narrowed. "Or a human," he muttered. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member looked at the captain with disbelief. "You can't let him," began the co-pilot. But the captain raised his hand. "He's already decided." Down in the chamber, Eli opened the final maintenance panel. Inside was the manual override, an ancient system buried deep in the reactor's design. It could restore balance to the phase core, but there was a reason no one used it anymore. To reach it, the operator had to stand inside a flood of radiation. The machine demanded a price. He wiped his forehead and laughed softly, almost bitterly. "You really did build her wrong, didn't you?" He muttered to himself. The comm crackled. "Grant," the captain said, his voice low. "We're detecting a new surge of heat." "What are you doing?" "Finishing this," Eli replied. "Don't you dare. That chamber will kill you in seconds." Eli smiled faintly. "I've lived longer than I expected to. Guess I'm on borrowed time anyway." The captain's voice broke. "You don't have to do this." "Someone has to," Eli said softly. "You've got families on this ship, Captain, kids, people who don't even know what's happening. They deserve a chance to go home." Tavern clenched his fists. "At least let us send drones." "They'll melt before they reach the core," Eli said. "And you don't have enough time to reprogram them." "Trust me, Captain. I've done this before." The words made the bridge go still. "You've done this before?" Eli looked at the reactor, remembering the screams, the heat, the light of another ship burning long ago. Once, a long time ago. Didn't end well then either. He took off his outer jacket, leaving only the heat-resistant undersuit. The air shimmered with radiation. His visor fogged instantly. He adjusted the seals, tightened the straps, and stared into the swirling storm of energy. "All right," he whispered. "Let's dance one last time." The reactor chamber's doors began to close behind him, sealing him in. The sound echoed like a final heartbeat. The crew on the upper platform watched in silence, their eyes wide, their hands trembling. None dared to speak. As Eli stepped closer to the core, the light grew blinding. His suit sensors screamed in warning. Radiation levels climbed past safe limits. His pulse quickened, but his steps remained steady. He reached the control conduit, a massive cylinder of glass and metal filled with pulsing energy. He raised his wrench and began to turn the manual valve, muscles straining. The sound was deafening. On the bridge, the chief engineer read the data aloud. "He's stabilizing the field. It's working. Power flow returning to normal." The captain gripped the edge of the console. "Hold it, human. Just a little longer." Inside the chamber, Eli could feel the heat seeping through his suit. His skin burned, his vision blurred. He could hear the reactor roaring, the ship trembling with each second. "Come on," he gasped, tightening the wrench. Hold together, you stubborn beast. A blinding surge of light exploded through the room. The energy field cracked like thunder. Eli was thrown to the floor, pain shooting through his chest. For a moment he couldn't move. Everything was white. Then, silence. He forced himself up, barely breathing, and looked at the monitor. The readings had stabilized. The reactor's violent glow had softened to a steady pulse. He laughed weakly, coughing. Told you I'd fix it. On the bridge, the alarms stopped. The readings fell back into the green zone. The ship was alive. The crew cheered, tears streaming down alien faces. The captain leaned forward. Grant, Eli, do you read me? Static. Then a weak voice. Yeah. Still here. Tavern exhaled deeply. You did it. Eli smiled faintly, leaning against the glass. Not me. Just good engineering. You saved us, human, the captain said quietly. You saved everyone. Eli's breathing grew slower. Guess I finally got it right this time. Eli, stay with us. We're coming to get you. But his voice was fading. Don't waste time. Keep them flying, Captain. The comm fell silent. The captain stared at the frozen signal, his throat tight. Around him, the bridge crew bowed their heads. The light steadied. The ship hummed softly again, and through the viewing window the stars shone brighter than ever. Captain Tavren whispered, You called it a sacrifice, human. I call it a lesson in courage. And somewhere deep within the ship, the reactor pulsed gently like the quiet, steady heartbeat of a man who gave everything so others could live. The silence that followed was heavy, so heavy that even the hum of the engines sounded like a heartbeat in mourning. The Orion star drifted through space, its bright hull scarred and smoking, but alive. Against the black sea of stars, it looked like a wounded giant still breathing after the storm. Inside, the crew moved quietly, their faces pale beneath the flickering lights. The alarms were gone now. Only the faint echo of the cooling systems filled the air, a tired sigh after chaos. Captain Tavren stood at the bridge window, staring out at the calm horizon of space. His scaled hands rested on the railing, claws still trembling. Behind him, the chief engineer spoke softly, afraid to break the fragile stillness. Containment stable, Captain. Reactor levels normal. Tavren didn't answer. He only asked, the human? The engineer swallowed. No signal. Radiation burst fried the sensors in that sector. We can't confirm his condition. The captain's jaw tightened. His reflection in the glass showed eyes full of guilt. He's gone, he whispered. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even the youngest cadet, barely out of training, stood frozen, her eyes glistening. Across every deck, alien passengers and crew alike felt the same ache. The being they once saw as small, fragile, and strange had become something greater, something they could not name. Down in the engineering bay, the damage teams moved cautiously. The chamber that once roared with deadly light was now dim and quiet. The walls were blackened, the floor littered with fragments of burnt metal. Smoke hung low, curling in the air like the last breath of a dying star. A search drone floated into the room, its blue beam scanning through the haze. Then it stopped, its light falling upon a figure lying beside the reactor glass. A burned wrench rested beside him. His suit was torn, his helmet cracked, but his face was still. Peaceful. The drone beeped softly, sending the image to the bridge. When the captain saw it, his throat closed. He turned away, his voice barely a whisper. Recover him gently. 2 crew members descended the lift, their eyes wet. As they lifted Eli Grant's body, his hand slid open and something small clattered to the floor. The wrench. The tool he had carried from the first moment he stepped aboard. The one that saved them all. The chief engineer picked it up carefully, brushing off the ash. The metal was warped and blackened, but still solid, like its owner. He stared at it for a long time before speaking. He must have known this would happen, and he did it anyway. Hours passed. The ship's systems returned to life one by one. Artificial gravity stabilized, air filtration hummed again, and the once chaotic decks became quiet corridors of grief. In the mess hall, dozens of passengers gathered in silence. Some prayed in their own languages. Others stood with their heads bowed. The captain entered slowly, his uniform still stained with soot. He walked to the front and looked at them, hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, all alive because of one man who wasn't. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. Today we faced death, and we survived. Not because of our strength, not because of our technology, but because of the courage of one man, a human who asked for nothing and gave everything. He held up the wrench. The crowd's eyes followed it, glowing softly under the lights. This, he said, was his weapon. Not of war, but of hope. A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He was just a passenger." The captain nodded slowly. Yes, just a passenger. But in the darkest hour, when all else failed, he became the heart of this ship. Remember his name, Eli Grant. The man who proved that bravery isn't about species or strength. It's about choice. He placed the wrench on a table before him. We will leave this here on the bridge wall beside the stars he saved us to see. Later, alone in his quarters, Tavren sat in silence. The stars outside moved slowly past the window. He played the ship's last audio transmission, Eli's final words before the chamber went silent. Someone has to do it. Keep them flying, Captain. The captain closed his eyes. We will, he whispered. I promise you, human. He reached for his log recorder and pressed the record button. His deep voice filled the quiet room. Captain's log, Cycle 1180. The Orion Star has survived a reactor failure thanks to one of our passengers, Eli Grant, human engineer. His bravery prevented the loss of over 500 lives. His sacrifice will not be forgotten. He paused, then added softly, May the stars guide him home. In the engineering bay, the maintenance crew finished sealing the damaged reactor. Before leaving, the youngest of them, a quiet alien with silver eyes, placed a small plaque beside the access door. It read, In honor of the human who held the stars together. The lights dimmed, and the ship continued on its journey through the endless dark, carrying not just its passengers but a story, a legend born from courage and selflessness. Somewhere deep within the ship, the reactor pulsed gently, its rhythm steady and strong. The hum of its core sounded almost like a heartbeat, and if one listened closely enough, they could almost hear a faint whisper echo through the metal walls. Another day's work done. Weeks passed. The Orion Star glided through the black ocean of space like a scarred survivor, damaged but unbroken. The fires were long extinguished, the systems fully restored. Yet even after time had calmed the storm, no one aboard spoke of the event without lowering their voices. What happened in that reactor chamber had become more than a memory. It had become a legend. Eli Grant's name spread quietly at first, carried through whispers in the corridors and soft conversations in the mess hall. Passengers told the story to newcomers who boarded at distant ports. They spoke of the human who had walked into fire to save lives, not his own. Soon, the whispers grew into something larger, a story retold across stations, colonies, and worlds. They called him the passenger who repaired the stars. In the ship's central hall, a small memorial now stood where the emergency beacon once was. A transparent case displayed Eli's burnt wrench, resting on a dark velvet cloth. Beneath it, a metal plaque read, Eli Grant, human, mechanic, dreamer, savior. And below, in the captain's own hand, a line was engraved. He came aboard as a passenger, and left as the reason we're still here. Every day someone stopped by. Some touched the glass. Others bowed their heads in silence. Even children, alien and human alike, would pause, staring at the tool that once held their world together. The captain made it a rule. Every voyage of the Orion Star would begin with a single moment of silence. Not for superstition, not for ritual, but for remembrance. Far from the ship, the story spread through the Galactic Union's communication networks. At first, few believed it. A human, alone, saving an alien starliner? It sounded impossible. Yet the official recordings, the logs, the reactor footage, the captain's own testimony, left no room for doubt. In academies across the stars, engineers replayed Eli's last minutes, studying every move, every adjustment, every decision. His methods defied logic. His instincts, his ability to hear the ship, became a subject of research and debate. Some called it genius, others called it faith. The Union's council held a ceremony in his honor, declaring him the first cross-species hero of the galactic age. But the Orion Star's crew didn't attend. The captain refused the medals, the speeches, and the titles. You can't honor a man with words, Tavren said quietly. You honor him by remembering why he did it. Back aboard the ship, The chief engineer often returned to the memorial late at night. He would sit by the glass case listening to the hum of the reactor. Sometimes, when the ship passed through quiet space, he swore he could hear another hum, faint, rhythmic, like footsteps echoing in metal corridors. Once, when a young cadet asked what made humans so brave, the engineer smiled softly. "Bravery doesn't come from what you are," he said. "It comes from what you decide to be when everything falls apart." That human decided to stand. Months later, the Orion star docked at the central hub world, Borealis Prime, a glittering city among the stars. The docking bay was filled with light, noise, and life. Reporters waited, cameras flashing, eager to capture the ship that had become a symbol of unity. When the passengers stepped out, they found thousands waiting. Alien families cheered, holding banners written in dozens of languages. Some bore symbols of Earth, a blue and white globe painted with care. As the crew descended, Captain Tavron followed last, holding the same wrench in his hands. The crowd fell silent. He looked out at them, beings of every kind, and raised it high above his head. "This," he said, his voice carrying through the air, "belongs to all of us. Because courage doesn't belong to one world or one species. It belongs to the stars." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Somewhere a child shouted, "For the human!" And soon hundreds of voices echoed it. "For the human! For the human!" Tavron stood tall, his scales gleaming under the light, his eyes wet. "For Eli Grant," he whispered. Years later, a small shuttle drifted through the quiet edge of space, an old battered vessel with no insignia, no signal beacon, and no registered pilot. It moved slowly, powered by a weak but steady engine. Inside, dim light flickered over a man sitting in the pilot's chair. His hair had grown longer, streaked with silver. His face was older, worn by radiation and time, but his eyes were still alive. Eli Grant opened them slowly. He looked out through the glass at a distant nebula glowing in gold and violet hues. A faint smile crossed his face. He whispered to the empty cabin, "Looks like you made it, old girl." On the navigation panel, a tiny symbol blinked, the Orion star's signature frequency. He chuckled softly. "Still flying. Knew you would." He reached for a metal charm hanging from the console, a small replica of the ship's wrench. "Guess I'm still just a passenger," he murmured. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to the man who had once repaired them. Back on Borealis Prime, every year on the same day, ships across the galaxy dimmed their lights for 1 minute. No alarms, no chatter, no engines, just quiet. They called it the Lightfall Pause. And during that silence, travelers would look out their windows past the glow of cities and engines, into the dark sky, wondering if somewhere, out there among the stars, the human who saved them was still watching. Because legends fade. But some become part of the universe itself, and so did he, Eli Grant, the passenger who held the stars together.